Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man that just informed me that the True Crime Garage Army has gone bazooka. He is the captain.
I've always been a bubblicious man myself, but it's good to be seen and it's good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Tonight we are drinking Brawler by Yards Brewing Company from the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Garage grade, 3.5 bottle caps out of 5. Brawler is an English ale that is delicately hopped for knockout flavor, and its smooth character adds to its drinkability. And Yards Brawler was brought to us by our garage brothers and sisters. First up, we have Sharon in Caloundra, Queensland, Australia.
And a big we like your jib to Christine in Columbus, Ohio.
Next, we have Lisa in Austin, Texas. Also in Texas, we have Lance out in Baytown.
And next up, we have Trudy from McCordsville, Indiana, or also from the Packs to Life.
And then all the way in Tacoma, we have Bacon Bits the cat. I knew you'd like that one, Captain.
All right, Bacon Bits.
That's a real donation to the beer fund coming from good old Bacon Bits there. And last but not least, a big thank you to Elizabeth in Willowbrook, Illinois.
And if you'd like to donate to the beer fund, you can do so at truecrimegarage.com and click on the donate banner.
Hey, and for all things true crime, find them at truecrimegarage.com. You can join in the blog on our website and check out the store page if you want old episodes. We still get questions about how do I find episodes from season 1 and 2. You find them in the store page, my friends, and you find them in the iTunes store as well.
All right, that's enough of the business. Gather around, grab a chair,
grab a beer.
Let's talk some true crime.
This was a case that you wrote about.
Yeah, I actually wrote about this case when I was still a crime reporter. I was working at the Free Times up in Cleveland in 2006, about a year after he disappeared.
How much time did you spend looking into Ray's case?
I'd say it was a good month to 6 weeks, kind of learning the ins and outs of the Gricar disappearance. And, you know, we only had a little bit of information at the time, because it was only about a year after he disappeared. But it struck me as a mystery that was going to last. Mm-hmm. It was very weird. In the same way that Maura Murray's case kind of stuck out for me, because just like Maura Murray, here we have somebody who disappeared. There's no evidence of a crime, and the clues can take you any way you want to go. You've got possible suicide. Mm-hmm. You've got motive for murder. Was it a murder? Did he walk away to start a new life somewhere? Mm-hmm. There's evidence for that too. And beyond that, there's like a sparkle of the paranormal in this one too, that suggests some sort of connection to, of all things, and I know how crazy this is going to sound.
Oh, here we go.
Time travel.
Okay.
And I want to get into
James has lost his mind.
I've just lost all credibility, but stick around. You'll
okay.
There's some neat things that about Gricar and this idea of time travel. I'm not saying he was a time traveler. I'm saying he might have disappeared in a way that would lead people to believe that. Anyways, we'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, you've set up the case well, the particulars of the case. But, you know, I guess we could go, you know, in order of, you know, possibilities here. You know, look at suicide. I kind of don't think it's, you know, I don't think it's suicide. But to support that, you've got the fact that his brother Roy disappeared in 1996. And his body was found in the river. And then you look at Ray Gricar, and his Mini Cooper was found by the river, and that's where he disappeared. They eventually found his computer and hard drive in the river. Some fishermen fished up the hard drive, or some fishermen fished up the laptop, and then about a month later, a woman finds the hard drive. So But then they never found Ray's body. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to jump into a river, if you're going to walk into a river, was it Virginia Woolf or, weigh your pockets down with rocks and walk in, the body's going to turn up. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to get rid of a body by committing suicide by jumping into a river. It'll float. It'll show up. We found the laptop, we found the hard drive, but no Ray. So
that almost leads to the evidence that he did jump in. Because you found those other items.
But again, yeah, if he did, where's the body there? To support that theory, you've got, some people look at how he was looking to retire and, didn't really know what to do with himself. Mm-hmm. And, was looking at that and kind of depressed. And, he had his job was his life more so than any of the women because he'd been married twice and divorced twice, and he was seeing this coworker there. So,
well, you see that a lot with men, is their work is their identity. Once they lose their work, they lose their identity, and they don't know what to do with themselves. So the theory is that, I'm going to retire and I'm nobody anymore. So I'll just end it.
But another thing about the suicide theory is that he had this daughter, Laura, and by all accounts, he loved her very much, and they were close when she was growing up. In fact, he was when they moved there, his wife had the job, and he was stay-at-home dad. Now, it's interesting to note that Laura is adopted. It's not his biological daughter, and I've never really figured out the backstory to that, how that adoption process worked. Did they adopt from somebody that they knew, or did they go through the typical adoption process? And it was, so that's something I'd really like to know about. But if it was suicide, Ray didn't really set things up to take care of Laura in his absence. This is one of the more interesting things about Ray, in my opinion. He was the DA of Center County. Penn State, is his jurisdiction. But when he died, there's almost no money in his accounts. Mm-hmm. His bank account has hardly any money in it. He never bought anything in his name. The car was in his girlfriend's name. He had no assets. So where's all that money that he was making? Did he really spend it all? Did he not budget well? Or did he have some sort of separate account? The police looked at the suicide theory and thought maybe he had been contemplating suicide for a while, because the day before his disappearance, he was seen in another body of water near this reservoir, and he seemed to be walking around and kind of contemplating life, the witnesses said. And, was he thinking about his brother and reminiscing about that and wondering about that? So, there's that possibility of suicide. Just like the Moore case, though, there are a lot of rabbit holes that you could go down, because there are clues that don't seem to make much sense. You go back to the Mini Cooper, there was some cigarette ash found inside the car. He was vehemently against smoking. He didn't smoke himself. It smelled of smoke when the detectives opened the car, as if somebody had just been smoking before shutting it up. And his cell phone was in there. So who was smoking in that car?
Right.
There was a witness at this antique, mall antique store where the Mini Cooper was found. It was found in this parking lot. Ray was seen there with an unidentified woman, beautiful, attractive woman. So who was that? Mm-hmm. And what does she have to do with this whole thing? He was very much a charmer. He very private person on one hand, very private, but was also very flirtatious with women, and was known, at the local diner to, pick favorite waitresses and always, flirt with them, and always be, with his other wives, there was always, these rumors of infidelity and, hanging out with women. And so did that have something to do with his disappearance? Was that on his mind?
Yeah, or did he have a side piece
right
that was now breaking it off?
Or who was married. Or who was breaking it off.
Or maybe he was not telling some of these ladies that he was married and had a kid, and You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, he wasn't married at the time of his disappearance.
Okay.
He had this girlfriend they were living together. Mm-hmm. They were very, of course.
Right, but still he could have been telling, the girls that he meets, "Oh, well, I'm single."
Right.
And I don't have anybody in my life and blah blah. And then once the side piece then finds out he does have a life, they're like, "Well, I'm going to tell on you."
Right.
Because that happens often.
Whoever this was hasn't come out, since the disappearance. Then you look at the case for murder, and, there are a lot of times I kind of lean this way because there's definitely motive for murder. But at the time in 2006, when I reported on this, it seemed very unlikely. Like, who would have had the balls to kill a DA in Center County? Well, 5 years later, after my article came out, Jerry Sandusky is arrested and charged with all these counts of, molesting boys at Penn State. Mm-hmm. And then it comes out that the prosecutor in charge of Center County, who was Ray Gricar, knew about this in 1998.
Yeah, he had investigated it for some time, having spoken to one of the victims.
Right.
However, they had no evidence to pursue the charges other than this boy's statement.
The boy's statement, and they actually got Sandusky to come in and they taped this interview where it was this weird thing that Ray had set up where he got the boy in the same room as Sandusky just to see what Sandusky would say or his body language. And there was an expert there that told Gricar, he's like, "Look, this guy, without a doubt, this guy's a pedophile." And, he could have charged Sandusky at that time and saved, maybe further victimization or whatever. But if anybody really runs Center County, Penn State at that time, it's Joe Paterno, right?
Right.
This revered, coach. And, his reputation, as we saw, was destroyed along with Sandusky's. The question is, how much he knew and for how long. Was it Ray's ultimate decision to not prosecute Sandusky? Was it somebody else? Was it Paterno? Was it pressure from somewhere? Was this something that Gricar always felt guilty about? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if, he was looking at retiring in December of 2005. He disappeared in April. Was he thinking about opening that can of worms before he retired so that he would have a clear conscience and be able to go on? Was he reopening that? And did he meet with Paterno? Did he meet with Sandusky or somebody else that was, wrapped up in all this? And was it that person? Was he trying to keep it kind of off the record until he had more? Those people certainly had a motive to get rid of Ray Gricar, I think.
It's similar to Spotlight too. I mean, with the idea of, well, we don't want to go after, the Catholic Church because of how big they are,
right?
And we could argue that college football
at Penn State
is possibly bigger, than church.
For sure. For some people, it is church. Absolutely. And I think they might be wrapped up in there somewhere.
Yeah.
There's another possibility here. One of the reasons Gricar didn't prosecute Sandusky was some sort of culpability. There were some weird internet searches on Gricar's computer before he disappeared. And one of the police officers who was investigating the case suggested to me that some of the searches had to do with being on the down low. Was there some sort of, sexual promiscuity, something weird going on there? I tend to not really buy into that because by all appearances, it seems that, Ray was really, really into women,
So meaning that the searches he was looking up were, possibly that he led a gay lifestyle outside of the public eye.
Some of the police wondered if he wasn't cruising these parks for men.
Okay.
Because he was seen at these parks, right before he disappeared. And some of the places he was seen were known, cruising spots at the time.
Right. But maybe possibly if I act like a ladies' man,
sure,
then that, and I'm kind of flamboyant about that. I think flamboyant might not have been the right choice of words, but if I'm, outwardly, oh man, I love women, then that's a pretty easy cover up for my alternative lifestyle.
I don't know how much I buy into that, or how much evidence there really is to that, and that still doesn't explain where the body is. If it does turn out to be murder. But
that would also possibly be a reason for suicide. Somebody that has lived such a long life and they feel for whatever reason that they can't, live a life where they can be true to themselves.
Right. And he, without a doubt, in my mind, Gricar is the one that wrecked his computer and hard drive. So what was on the computer and hard drive that needed to be destroyed?
Right.
Somebody in Gricar's home that he was sharing with Patty Fornicola, and this is probably Ray himself, was Googling, how to destroy a hard drive, how water destroys hard drives.
Right.
So he had this plan when he went there to destroy this hard drive. What was on there? Was it something to be murdered for? Was it something he was going to be shamed for and he committed suicide? Was it plans to run away? Was it his, bank accounts and the things he had set in motion to walk away? And as more time goes by, I find myself, just like in Maura Murray's case, I'm leaning to this idea that he planned to start a new life. And
but possibly, again, because if you're leading this other lifestyle, that maybe you can't come out as yourself.
Sure.
But the idea that, I can start a new life, start a new name, and I don't have to worry about being shamed at all.
Right.
Because I'm just this new person.
This new person.
But again, it's one of those pieces of evidence that can lean either way.
Right.
But have we had anybody that has come out in the last 10 years or so that has said that they've had a romantic relationship with him as like a man saying that?
Not that I know. And that's why I think that might be not actually what was going on there.
Right.
I mean, he certainly had characteristics that would seem a little, effeminate or prissy. He's a very clean, meticulous type of person, but I think that was just his, kind of slightly on the autism spectrum, OCD-ness that was Ray. I want to talk a little bit more about the theories that back up the walkaway, why he's about to turn 60. He's going to retire. Why then? Why is he retiring then?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems to me
or not retiring, but why would he walk away at that point?
Right, because that seems like the least likely time to walk away. He's going to get a retirement. He's going to get a pension for this job that he's done forever. He had plans to travel. These don't point to any reasons to walk away.
Unless he was a spy for Slovenia, which out of context sounds ridiculously silly, but let me break it down.
Okay.
And this now pulls into question whether or not his brother's suicide was in fact a suicide.
Right.
Keep in mind that Gricar disappears, he's making good money, but nobody can find any accounting of that money.
Right.
He's got no assets in his name. A couple years ago, Deadspin, one of their reporters puts in a public records request for the FBI file and CIA file of Ray Gricar, and it comes back redacted for national security reasons. Mm-hmm. And the CIA is involved and says we can't release certain bits of information related to Ray Gricar's disappearance. Now, what in the world is the CIA doing involved in Ray Gricar's disappearance and this disappearance of this DA? Well,
right.
There is a really good sighting of Ray after his disappearance in Southfield, Michigan. This is so cool because the person who spotted Gricar was a retired police detective who when he was working for the police, did composite sketches.
Okay.
So this is the guy you go to.
Yeah, this is the eyewitness you want.
This is the best eyewitness ever. And he says he definitely saw Ray Gricar after he disappeared in Southfield, Michigan. Now, what's important about Southfield, Michigan
nothing. I don't give a shit about Michigan.
Right. Nothing's up there
Go Bucks.
except for the Macedonian consulate. And if you're laying low and you want to leave the country and get a visa to Slovenia, you would go through the Macedonian. That would be the closest place that Ray Gricar could get to go through there. And he has citizenship. His, I think, grandfather or something, his ancestors came from Slovenia. So he could apply for a visa and get taken over there, and everything would be kosher. That's how he could escape the United States under radar. The FBI file also shows that Gricar took 2 trips to Yugoslavia, which is now part of Slovenia. He took 2 trips to Yugoslavia during the Cold War in 1973 and 1984. For the FBI, these are red flags. Why is this young man in 1973 traveling to Yugoslavia into the Soviet Union?
Well, but it is his motherland.
It's his, yes.
Right.
But does he, I don't know that he would have any living relatives there. They would be distant.
But that doesn't really matter, right?
But let's consider he was turned at that point. He and his brother turned to protect the motherland, to gather information, to be a sleeper agent, essentially. What better job would there be than, a district attorney in Pennsylvania, which is near, Center County is very close to another, there was this very famous case of this directly north. There's another county in Pennsylvania, north of Center County, very famous case where this government official was turned out to be very corrupt and was laundering money through the government system and disappeared. He ends up in Slovenia with all these foreign connections. So I'm not saying this is exactly what happened, but if Gricar and his brother were involved in espionage, it would explain the FBI's presence, the CIA's presence. It would explain possibly the brother's suicide that wasn't actually a suicide. Maybe it was murder. And it would explain why Gricar decides to disappear then, because he's finished his mission. He's finished his duty, which is to work in government in America and to do what he can for the homeland. And now he gets to go home.
Right.
But in order to go home, he has to burn his old ID, He's got the burn notice.
But also, too, it could be you have this talented, smart prosecutor, and it could be not working for his motherland. It could be working for the United States as well.
Right. You could take it the other way.
Right. And that's why he would visit in 73, then 84, and then, well, we're going to have you go missing here. So then,
exactly,
when you go back home, you're a new person.
Was he one of our spies? Was
yeah,
he
and you think, and that sounds crazy too, but people have to understand, like the FBI and the CIA, they recruit people. Well, they got to depending on what the mission is, they're going to recruit somebody in their 20s or 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And he's already working in the system. And somebody like that might go, well, this is a prestigious move up,
Right. Right. They could set up the secret accounts for him, the Swiss bank accounts that he must have had, to funnel his money.
We'll take care of all the stuff, and then when it comes out that you're missing, we're going to be investigating this. But you've worked the Mara Murray case for so long, to get the FBI or the CIA involved in a missing person case is really hard to do.
Oh, yeah.
And you got both of them in this case, which is fascinating. All right, we're back. Cheers, mates. Nick is in Florida. He's having a good time. Keeps on sending me pictures of beers, and I think he's drunk in every picture he sent me, but I'll post those on Instagram. Also, quick reminder, we have hoodies for sale. People have been asking for them for a long time, so I worked my butt off, and now we got some hoodies for sale. and it's a pre-order, and it's going to only last for a short period of time. So if you want one, get one now at truecrimegarage.com and click on the store page. So let's get back to the conversation that we had with James Renner about the Vanishing Man, Ray Gricar.
And then you've got the time travel. As I was investigating his disappearance back in 2006, somebody directed me. I was directed to this book, this obscure sci-fi book called 2020 Vision, written by Pamela West in the 80s. And it was hard to track down a copy. I think it's out of print, but I was able to get one through Amazon. And I picked it up. And at first glance, you're like, what does this have to do with Ray Gricar? And you read the book, and it's about this detective who had this one case he could never solve near Penn State. And he ends up growing old. And in some ways, this has shades of Primrose Lane in it. And grows old and then uses time travel in order to go back and save this woman from being killed.
Like Quantum Leap.
Kind of like Quantum Leap. Yeah, right. And the interesting thing about it is the date that this guy disappears in the book is April 15th. And there are clues like a little bit of cigarette ash found inside his vehicle, and he didn't smoke. And his car was found by a river. And you realize that everything from this sci-fi book about time travel, this guy that disappears inside the book, matches up with everything about Ray's disappearance, even the date. Mm-hmm. And you would think this is total coincidence until you realize and find out that Ray Gricar was the consultant on the book 2020 Vision.
Right.
And Pamela West was a journalist / professor at Penn State. And she's writing under a pen name. And for a while, I wondered if Ray Gricar wasn't, in fact, Pamela West. Right. But he's not. She really does exist. And what she wanted to do was she wanted to write a true crime book called about the Betsy Aardsma case.
Right.
Which is a famous unsolved case out of Penn State. Have you guys done that one yet?
No, but was that the girl that was killed in the library?
Yes.
Her body was stabbed?
Yep.
Yeah.
Her body was found in the stacks. And this was like back in 69 that her body was found in the stacks in the library at Penn State. And when they found her body, they couldn't figure out how she died. She was just dead on the floor. And what they found later was she was stabbed once directly through the chest into her heart. And it was a clean cut in, out, and she bled inside. So there was no blood outside of her body, and she dropped dead like that. To this day, that case remains unsolved. Now, Pamela West thought she knew who did it, and she wanted to write a book explaining who did it and all of her evidence for it. And she went to Gricar asking help, how do I do this without getting sued? And he said, well, why don't you put all the details in there and just make it fictitious, add some sci-fi to it. And that way you get what you've done, all this research can go to something, but you're not going to be able to name the person you think did it. So was this, if Gricar is going to walk away, was he doing it in some sort of funny, was he having a little fun with it?
Oh, he's leaving a clue.
Right.
Like, I helped with this book. One of the big things was that this guy has to go missing or back in time, right? And what happened in the book? Okay, well, I need to go missing. I'm just going to do that.
Yeah.
And somebody's going to get the reference. It might take them a while.
That's what I'm thinking.
But you got the reference.
Right. So I hope that that's what happened, and he was having a little fun with his disappearance. It seems too much of a coincidence to me.
Yeah.
The exact date, the fact that Gricar was the consultant on this book. The cigarette ash, everything matches.
That's tiny details. If it was just guy went back in time and here's the date and then he went missing, I'd go, well, that's one.
Right.
But once you get those little small details.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, the other thought that people have had along those lines is, was he close to, did he want to go after Betsy Aardsma's killer before he retired? And did he try to meet with Betsy Aardsma's killer there? And there was a scuffle and he was murdered. But then again, you still don't have a body. Mm-hmm. So,
well, and it doesn't explain the hard drive and the computer in the lake.
Exactly.
Well, maybe you could clear up a few things since you did speak with the investigator.
Yeah, sure.
There was rumor from his coworkers and his girlfriend that he may have been suffering from depression, that he was acting strange and out of character that week leading up to his disappearance. One thing that keeps coming up as a question mark amongst a lot of people is his morning before he disappeared. Did he leave work early? Did he not go into work at all that day? I've seen it reported both ways.
From what I've heard, so he disappears it's a Friday, Friday, April 15th. And from what I understand, he was at work the day before. But then he called off. He was playing hooky. He was supposed to be in at work, and nobody thought that was too weird because he was, getting ready for retirement, and he would often take these days where he'd just drive into the country and go antiquing, where he was possibly meeting up with this other woman, who knows? But anyways, it wasn't that out of character. What was odd is, so he calls off on that Friday. One of his coworkers, also prosecutor, swears, 100% swears, he saw Gricar there that day in the passenger's seat of somebody else's car. And he had come in, it looked like he had come in and maybe forgot something and was, but he was pulling out of the prosecutor's office in the passenger seat of somebody else's car. And he made note of it because he's like, what, he's not supposed to be in today. He's here. Who's driving the car? So what's he doing back at the office that day?
But there's no record of him actually going into the office.
Not that we've found. No, He was. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Gricar was also obsessed with an Ohio case, unsolved case, that he mentioned to a number of coworkers in the weeks leading up to and the months leading up to his disappearance, and that's the unsolved disappearance of Mel Wiley. Mel was the chief of police in, I want to say Bath, but I'm not entirely sure. It was near Bath, Ohio. And this was in the 70s or 80s, I believe. But he disappeared one day, and they found his shoes and clothes and his wallet tucked into his shoes on Edgewater Beach up in Cleveland. And they're like, wow, he must have drowned out there, but they never found a body. And then they went back and went to his typewriter and were able to extract like all the letters that he had written. And very obviously, this guy had planned for his disappearance and was, going off to California. But he did it in a way he was never found again. And he was working in government, and he had this top position, and this guy just up and disappeared, started a new life. And Gricar knew about it and was kind of weirdly obsessed about it and had mentioned that case to a couple people. So it was on his mind.
Yeah, or again, maybe leaving little breadcrumbs.
Right, right. Like, I can't tell you where I'm going, but when I disappear, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think might have been what he was telling people.
What's very strange with the lack of money in the bank.
That, to me, says volumes. It says that there's an account out there we don't know about.
He didn't seem to be living a frivolous lifestyle.
Yeah, he wasn't like no extravagant living. He didn't have his own house. He was living with his girlfriend.
If he was broke, he could have attempted to get reelected and keep his position.
Exactly. Yeah.
For another 4 years.
Right. He wasn't broke. We just don't know where his money is.
Yeah, he's probably at least making six figures.
You would think.
So,
Penn State? Yeah.
Yeah.
So he calls off. There is an eyewitness that says that they believe they saw him at work in the parking lot. That clears up the discrepancy of did he actually go into work and just do a half day and leave. As far as his vehicle goes, we should probably set this up a little bit because he had a Mini Cooper, red Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
And this wasn't just like, oh, go out and buy a fuel efficient car to get you to and from work. He was a driver.
Yeah.
He liked to take long drives. He seemed to be particular about his vehicle.
Yeah. The vehicle that was in his girlfriend's name. Yeah. It was his, which is weird.
And so that makes the cigarette ashes even more strange because he doesn't. we don't see any signs that he would have allowed somebody to smoke in his car,
right?
Just kind of willy-nilly. It seemed like something that he wouldn't let happen.
Absolutely, unless it's his last time in that car.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I picture is his sexy CIA handler, you know, coming in, and you know they sit in the car for a minute, and then she's like, you know, got the cigarette in her mouth, and she's like, "Well, Ray, it's been a trip. Mm-hmm. Take one last look at Happy Valley before I take you back to Slovenia."
Right.
And then they get into a waiting black sedan and, you know, drive off into the sunset.
So his laptop that's later found, it's a county issued laptop. And that's why I brought up the whole thing of whether he was at work that day or not, because a lot of people have questioned, well, if he called off and didn't go into work, how likely would it be that he would have had that computer with him at the time of his disappearance?
Right. From what I understand, it was issued through work, but it was a laptop that he could take home and do his work there. So, you know, I don't put too much into that. I wouldn't look too hard into that for clues.
His cell phone's found in his vehicle. His keys, wallet, never found.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, right.
And is the vehicle locked? I can't remember, but I
think
do know
it's locked.
The vehicle's locked, no keys, and the cell phone's in the car but turned off.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And this is a county issued cell phone as well.
I think, you know, again, like, I don't want to get tracked, so I'm leaving this cell phone here. I've got my burner on me, maybe. Or if he was murdered, you know, nobody else wants that bit of evidence being able to tie them to it later. Mm-hmm. So again, you've got these clues that can lead you both ways. I tend to lean more towards, you know, these all seem like clues that he himself was responsible for. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see what was on that laptop. They've never been able, even though they recovered the hard drive, they've never been able to extract any data out of it because it was in the river so long.
Yeah, and if anybody's going to be able to, it would have been the CIA or the FBI.
They had a group that works with NASA examine the hard drive, and they weren't able to pull anything out of it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to me because, like you said, the connection with the book, the connection to this Ohio case, it seems like he had some interest in starting over.
It does, you know, and if none of that were to happen, you know, it really would look more like a murder, you know, abduction.
Mm-hmm. Well, the tough thing about, you know, when they're like, well, we think the body went in the river. I mean, yeah, suicide or murder, you would expect that at some point you'd find the body. But
right.
There is always that possibility that you...
Sure.
That
get stuck
random case that they just didn't find it. Right.
You know, and getting to the abduction, you know, murder thing, that's very unlikely with a 60-year-old man, too. Unless it's like, I mean, if we're talking abduction from the scene and murder, it would suggest organized crime to some extent.
Yeah, well, possibly. And well, then then you got to look into his brother's death as well.
Exactly right. Yeah.
You know, because maybe that was not a suicide, and then it's how are these murders connected?
Right.
Well, maybe not though. His brother's not a district attorney. A district attorney can create a lot of enemies.
That's true.
Yeah.
Especially over a 20-year time frame.
Yeah, definitely. But what was his brother involved in? Because, you know what I mean? Because sometimes it's like maybe his brother was, I don't know much about his brother at all, but I'm just saying if you wanted to start speculating and going down that rabbit hole, it's like, what is his, you know, yeah, I'm this prosecutor and I'm doing well for myself, but this guy's struggling, so maybe I know some people that can help him out, or maybe he's just a bad seed.
Right. The brother, too, could just be a legitimate suicide.
Right.
Although, you know, suicides very rarely just walk into a river. You know, that's very determined. You know, there are better ways to kill yourself, especially for men. Men are usually gun, you know, to the mouth. More violent. You know, they don't usually walk into a river to drown themselves.
Well, his brother, you know, in the river, kills himself. Vehicle found near a bridge.
Yep.
Ray disappears. His items are found in or on the banks of the river.
Yep.
And his vehicle's found near a bridge.
Yep. if he disappeared, he wanted to, that clearly that would have been on his mind. Does he want us to think about that? Is he trying to suggest that it was suicide? To really walk away? The more I think about this case, as weird as it sounds, I lean towards the spy theory, that he was either one of us or, spying for them. And I'd love to go to Slovenia and just
try to
look around for a while.
Well, he'd be how old now?
Oh, shoot. He'd be 70.
Mm-hmm.
74,
70, yeah. But the thing here is, here's what I question about him walking away or being a spy and choosing that, okay, now it's time for me to go. Isn't it an extreme poor taste to leave your vehicle in the same situation that your brother's vehicle was found in when you have a daughter? Right. I don't care, adopted or not. You have a nephew that was the son of his brother. You do have some family that lived through an experience where a relative went missing, vehicle found near a bridge. He's missing for about a week until they figure out that he's in the river, and then they ultimately rule it a suicide. So now I'm planning my disappearance. I'm planning to walk away. I'm going to, in the poorest of taste, leave my vehicle next to a bridge in my items in the river. That's a really good point I hadn't thought about before. That would be kind of a mean thing to do for your who you assume would be his loved ones. But let me ask you this: like, let's say he was a spy, and it was time to go back home to the motherland. How would you do it without telling everybody you're a spy? How would you disappear? Me, I would personally. I think that walking away is rude and bad enough on its own.
Well, but, I kind of wish you would walk away.
But what I'm saying is, you can attempt to do it without a trace. But you could leave the vehicle. You could drive the vehicle off into the woods somewhere.
Yeah, but you could leave the vehicle at your house, and it actually then becomes even more of a mystery because it's like, so he disappeared from his house, but his car's here,
and maybe he was doing them a favor by not leaving it at the house, so the investigators wouldn't look at the people that live there as
to make them
suspects.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So he drives it out there, and he's got his brother in mind. Yeah, I just don't know that if that's who you are, if that's your identity, and you have to do this one way or another, is there a decent way to do it?
That's true.
Now, I didn't even think about that until we started talking. But yeah, of course, if he's doing that, he's going to make sure that he doesn't disappear from home because he doesn't want his loved ones to be suspects.
Don't implicate Patty in anything that she was unaware of.
Yeah, so it's that weird piece of evidence where it goes back and forth because in one sense, it's like, well, this is in really bad taste.
Right.
But in the other sense, it basically leads you to believe that, because of his brother and because of everything going on in retirement, that he was so depressed that he took his own life,
And also he does it during the day when he knows his girlfriend's at work and has witnesses that put her at work. Mm-hmm. So he's furthering, doing damage control for her.
Well, yeah, damage control there, but also almost damage control for the family where it's like, yeah, they've been through that before and that was traumatic.
Yeah.
But it's almost understandable.
Right.
The second time, it's like, well, he was depressed and his brother, and maybe this was his way of being with his brother.
Right. Right. I think we've solved it here. I think he's...
I don't like the other woman theory.
No?
Not at all. And I'll tell you why. We're not talking about a guy that had been married for 30 years.
Right.
Had 14 children with the same woman.
Right.
He's been divorced twice.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming up on a retirement where he's going to receive a decent retirement that he's earned. He's worked a lot of years to earn it.
Right.
I just don't, in the relationship with Patty, obviously I don't know the ins and outs of it, but they weren't married.
Right.
They shared a place together. I can't get into the other woman theory because I think it would be very easy for him to just end the relationship with Patty and start this new relationship or bring this going on relationship to light.
Exactly.
And continue his life and retire and, set up a life with the new woman rather than this whole walking away.
Unless that woman was his handler, or how about this? This is another weird detail about this case. So this other woman that he was seen with, people recognized her as like to a person. Like the one of the people that saw him with her said, yeah, and it wasn't just some beautiful woman. It was this specific beautiful woman who's a journalist / TV. I think she was involved in TV, like news up there too.
Okay. So
the police are like, wow, okay, we got to find her. And they went to find her. She had also called off work that day. And they tracked her. She was like, and I think if I'm getting this right, upstate New York, but she had like traveled out of the city.
Right.
And so they track her down, and I think she was at like a wedding of a family member or something. She had a pretty good excuse. But how weird is that like the person that that the witness is sure was with Ray also called off that day?
Mm-hmm.
It's just a bad coincidence for her, or is there more to that?
How thorough do you think that they tried to track him, the authorities? Because I mean, there's no crime committed here, but we're also talking about an active district attorney goes missing.
Right.
They're going to try to track this guy. It's not like...
Well, that's another weird part of this too, because the FBI didn't take over the case right away. It should have been a state case. It should have been state troopers. It should have been the attorney general office involved. But everybody kind of stepped back and they're like, okay, let the state college police take this over. And we're talking about a department that had like 3 police officers. They weren't prepared to look for a missing district attorney. But all the bigger agencies are like, no, let them handle it. Is that because the bigger agencies had access to the information that Gricar was a spy and that we knew he was disappearing and let him go? That's weird. Like it should have been a bigger case, but it was left to the smallest department that could have been involved.
Well, it was left to it at first, but then everybody else then comes in. But maybe they all come in to go, see what we tried.
Maybe.
Hush.
Yeah, it looks like that at some point, but the FBI weren't really ever involved with the hunt for it, as far as we can tell. The state becomes involved in it eventually, and they seem to step in and do their own investigation. But at every turn, the AG seems to like kind of scuttle it, or just weirdly silent about it. Or, it's just, there's a lot of weirdness surrounding why the people put in charge were this very small police department. So what do you think? You got a hunch?
I have no hunch. I personally just see a lot of reasons to not walk away. That's what I keep coming back to. I was unaware about the bank account thing.
Right.
Because in this is kind of a vague, broad statement, but when you look into this case, they say, well, they checked his bank accounts, they checked his credit cards, they checked his phone records, and there was found no clues.
Right.
And that's kind of all they leave you with. So you assume, when I read that statement, I assume, well, all is well. They found no clues. Well, no bank account.
That's a clue.
Is a clue.
Yeah, I think what you got to go back to exactly how they worded it in newspaper accounts too, because they're very careful with the semantics of that. But they're like, we looked into his accounts, but we found no, something like no evidence there to suggest or whatever. But the fact, yeah, exactly right. The fact that there is no money in there should tell you something.
That's a big thing.
Yeah.
But what does that point to? Because that can point to suicide pretty easily. Here's this guy that didn't save anything, worked a bunch of years, but nothing to show for it. His car's not even in his own name. And so I'm walking away.
This is a guy who's very meticulous in every other part of his life. Mm-hmm. I would think he would be very meticulous about his financial situation there.
Yeah, too. So is it just that the fact that there's no money? I mean, there has to be some transactions on those accounts.
I think there were some. I don't know how much, but we're talking about, I think it's like a couple hundreds of dollars in like, an account that was left when he disappeared. And no assets, by the way. Everything else was in everybody else's name, like his girlfriend's or his wife's name. He never had assets.
So we have a successful DA who disappears, and then when you look into his financial background, if you didn't know his job or the length of his career, you would assume you're looking at some 27-year-old dude that's living paycheck to paycheck.
Right.
No, not even that, because the transaction history wasn't that in-depth, though, right?
Right.
So it's almost like you're looking at a 15-year-old kid that has a savings account with his father's name on it, and he only puts money in it when he has a birthday or Christmas.
Huh.
You know what I mean? Like,
right.
coming out, that's what I used to do. I was a banker. So a lot of people on that level would have their own personal banker, would have a portfolio.
Sure.
Especially, prosecutors, cops.
Yeah, right. Like stocks and bonds.
Yeah. And building up for retirement. That can go away pretty quickly, and that could be a motive.
Right.
Because that would be the other motive, too, is like, well, what if he did have all this money? And
he was divorced twice.
That's like, it all went to alimony.
It all went to the...
Well, I would want to know how he was cashing his checks. That would be a big question for me. How is he cashing his checks? Because let's just say that there would be a motive. A lot of people would go, well, you need to put your money in the bank. I was a banker for a long time. And we had a bunch of really rich, retired, guys in their 70s and 80s that they had really small accounts, low activity, but they came into the bank every week. And I know they were just stockpiling their money at their house,
Oh, really?
in a safe or whatever, because they didn't trust, because of the depression and stuff like that, they didn't trust the banks. Now, I'm not saying you didn't trust the banks because of the depression, but why would you trust the banks or have any assets when possibly with your last two divorces, and that would be public record of what they got in the divorce.
Sure.
So if he got, taken to the cleaners twice, then it's like, well, I'm going to take all my money and put it in
the mattress
in a safe or something. But that would also become another reason for motive. If one of his friends or somebody found out, hey, this guy doesn't put any money in the bank,
right,
and he doesn't have all these assets, and he took all his money, he just hides it away.
Gricar's got like $100,000 in cash sitting in his house. Yeah,
that would be a motive.
It doesn't explain the computer, though.
No. Well, but the computer's not as weird as the searches.
Yeah,
the Google searches of how to, destroy the hard drive.
The police wondered if he had a journal on the computer that he was keeping.
A personal journal that he was keeping.
Yeah. Or, he's district attorney. Is that where he kept all the dirt he had on everybody else? Mm-hmm. And somebody's getting real scared because he's up for retirement. Is he going to transfer that dirt file over to the next prosecutor?
Right.
Again, we're going around in
Oh, what was that movie?
J. Edgar Hoover?
Yeah, where he every time there was a new person in, his whole mission was to get the dirt file.
Oh, sure.
And then he'd give it to him. And he'd be like, don't worry, I got my own copy. You know what I mean? So it's like...
Right.
Maybe he had some of those dirt files and somebody... The weird thing, too, about the search is, would they be able to know when those searches happened? Like, was it, that day?
I don't know. Because
if it's that day, it could really be in the murderer's hands.
They don't... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think, the searches from home where he's like, how to destroy a hard drive?
Right.
I think that was from the night before. I think I've read that happened.
Okay, so those searches were actually going from his home computer, not the
personal computer that he shared with his girlfriend.
Right. It's neat to travel down there too. Down to, they call it Happy Valley. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful. I mean, just a beautiful drive. And I always picture him, jetting through the valley and, looking for these antique stores and, maybe going. It would be an excellent place to do the spy drops, at a park, put it underneath the park bench and take off, and your handler comes. And I hope he's in Slovenia, just, eating some fish and whatever they do in Slovenia.
And he's listening to this show right now going, they're still talking about me.
If you could time travel, you brought it up, so here we go. If you could time travel back to a decade.
Mm-hmm.
Does one pop immediately into mind?
Oh, for sure. I definitely, without a doubt, go back to the 60s. You know, you had pre HIV, free love, free drugs. That sounds like a very fun time.
Mm-hmm.
How about you?
Oddly enough, I would pick the 60s as well.
All right,
for
we can hang out.
different
Good stuff.
reasons.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was the decade of the assassinations. You know.
Oh
and
sure, yeah.
There's a lot of questions.
He wants to go back to shoot some people.
No, it's similar to your book, The Man on Primrose Lane, where he goes back and he's aware of this victim, and he believes if he can follow her around long enough that he can intercept the killer or her abductor and stop the crime from happening. It's like the captain said here, quantum leap.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to sit there like as JFK's coming down the with the motorcade, see if anybody really was in that grassy knoll or peeking over the fence.
There was definitely somebody in the grassy knoll. All you have to do is read it. It's in the Warren Report. A lot of people don't know that. In the Warren Report, they claim that there was possible shots from the grassy knoll. So the government hasn't fully dismissed this idea.
I really think what happened that day is somebody contracted 3 different people and they didn't tell the other ones.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you had this, and whoever was going to get busted was going to get busted.
Yeah. Question for you. So now that we're on the time traveling, so we said what decade, right? So, but what case would you solve?
Oh, 100% Amy Mihalovic. I'd be right at the plaza, at the end of the day as she's coming in just to see who comes up to her. And
then you could stop it though.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you do that, I mean, now we're in the realm of fiction. So you've got James Renner showing up in 1989, and this guy comes up to Amy Mihalovic, and now I'm 100% sure I've got the killer.
Right.
So I pummel him to death or whatever. And so then now I'm in prison.
And until next week.
From sunny Florida, be good, be kind, and don't litter.